and welcome to my channel. I'm Kenna and I make videos every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday related to fashion, food, lifestyle, just anything really going on in my life, and I occasionally want to make videos about my gastroparesis story and what I went through. So if any of those things sound like they interest you at all, subscribe. I would love to have you. But today I'm going to do another video related to what I went through when I had gastroparesis. So if you're new and you don't know about my gastroparesis story or haven't watched my gastroparesis related videos, you may not know a little bit about what I went through. But if you want to know more about that, I will link the videos either like in the corner or down in the description. And yeah, you can watch those if you want to know more about it. But today's video is going to be about how I ended up in the hospital with a feeding tube. So I'm just going to give you a little background first about what gastroparesis is, just very briefly, just so you kind of understand what this video is going to be about if you're new. But basically, gastroparesis is delayed emptying of your stomach. So, and you have symptoms like nausea, bloating, constipation, no appetite, getting full really quickly, and it's a really sucky condition to have, and it impairs your ability to get nutrition and just affects your everyday life. That's, I guess, pretty much what I'm going to tell you. But if you really want to know more about it, there's so much more that goes with it. Just watch those videos because I have a 3-part series on all of that will explain that in more detail. So there's a couple reasons that I wanted to film this video explaining about how I almost died, I guess, but like I don't like using that terms, but if I didn't get treatment or go to the hospital, I definitely could have, and how I ended up with the feeding tube. And those reasons are because I want to show the dangers of what happens if you don't eat and don't get the proper nutrition, and how dangerous GI disorders, not just gastroparesis, how dangerous like a lot of GI disorders can be if you don't get the proper care or you can't find help. I don't know, I just want to bring more awareness to what really goes on when you have a GI condition, because there's so much that people don't know about and so much that can happen and can go wrong, and I just want to bring more awareness to that. I also want to share what it's like to have a feeding tube, get a feeding tube, and stuff like that, because there's a lot of people out there who have feeding tubes or maybe getting feeding tubes that want to know more about it so they feel more comfortable when they have it or when they're gonna get it. And I just want to show how important it is to really listen to your body and to don't wait until things are too late, because oftentimes with the human body, I learned this a lot like when studying nursing, is the consequences of medical conditions often appear before it's too late to fix them, which I don't know if that makes sense to you, but anyways, it's often too late before you can treat it. And I just want to show, like, I just want to bring more awareness, because like I said, with more awareness, more treatments, more empathy, stuff like that, awareness is really just what I want to accomplish here, and just to help other people out and just to share more about my story. So enough rambling, I'm just going to get right into my story about what led up to my hospital admission and me getting a feeding tube and my whole experience with my feeding tube. I go into more detail about all of this in my gastroparesis story, but I'm going to give you a little introduction to how it led there. So like I said, with gastroparesis, a lot of your symptoms are like nausea, lack of appetite, bloating, you get full really quickly, stuff like that, and that just impairs your ability to eat and to get enough food and calories and nutrition in you. And there's a lot of foods that you can't eat because it makes things worse. So it was really difficult to get in enough nutrition, but I was able to do it for a little bit. And then there became a period of time in my life where I was only eating once every 24 hours, sometimes even up to 36 hours. And that went on for about maybe 2 to 3 months. And when I did eat that once every 24 hours, it was only between like 200 500 calories, and that's all I could do. And the reason I did that was because I was in nursing school and I had a job, and it was just, I had to find a way to eat enough to kind of keep myself going, I guess, but I also couldn't eat too much where it'd just be too nauseous and just kind of out where I couldn't do school, where I couldn't work. That was just kind of a very dangerous period in my life that I had to go through, was just eating that little and going through all of that. That's what I did for a while, because sometimes I guess that is just life with a GI disorder. Like, I just didn't want my life to stop. I wanted to keep going. So yeah, that is what I went through for about 2 to 3 months. So then it came time to when I was gonna go see my doctor in Cleveland, Ohio, around December of 2019, and it was also finals week of one of my semesters in school, and the week started on Monday, and I was gonna go to Ohio Wednesday, and I had my appointment on Thursday morning in Ohio. I ate a meal Monday night, and then I just didn't get hungry, and I was super nauseous, and I did not eat until Friday morning when I was in the hospital. And that was just because, one, I wasn't hungry and I was super nauseous, and then two, I had to make it through the week. I had to make it through finals week. I had to finish out the semester, and I had to make it on a plane, like it was like 3 to 4 hour plane flight with like the connections and stuff like that. I had to make it through that, make it to the appointment, make it back to Florida, all of that. So I'm like, I cannot risk being so nauseous. I just have to make it through this, and then I can worry about nutrition later, which was such a bad thing on my part. But it was also like I was trapped in a corner, because it's like, I don't know, like I needed the nutrition, but I also needed to make it through everything, and my body was preventing me from getting the nutrition because of my condition. It was just a hot mess. It was a horrible thing to go through, and I wish that on nobody. It is seriously so awful. But anyways, I did not eat Monday, and then I flew to Ohio Wednesday night, had my doctor's appointment Thursday morning, and then flew back Thursday night. And then Friday morning, so I'm back in Orlando in this bed right here, and I wake up and I was super groggy, and I was just like, oh, I had a long week, I had finals, I literally went on a plane Wednesday night, doctor's appointment Thursday, flew home Thursday night, and then super late, and then went to bed. So I'm like, that is why I am so tired. But I was just so groggy, and I was like, I couldn't like stay awake. Like I'd wake up and then I'd go back to sleep, and I don't know, I couldn't stay awake. But then eventually I woke up and I was super nauseous, and I was like, I don't know, it was more than usual, but I also didn't think of anything of it because it was my normal symptoms. I get those symptoms on the daily, like nothing out of the ordinary here. And then usually I don't throw up. I talked about this in my gastroparesis story, but I have this little aversion to throwing up. I don't throw up unless my body's in like super danger, I guess. That's such a weird way to say it, but unless something is super wrong, then I don't throw up. Otherwise, I kind of just experience this super bad nausea. But this time, I had that super bad nausea, and then I was like, oh crap, I think I'm gonna throw up. I was like freaking out because I'm like, no. But then I kind of went to the bathroom, and then I just immediately started dry heaving, and that was just really awful experience. Driving is so bad, it hurts so bad, but I was still kind of out of it at that point. I was like I was freaking out. I was lethargic, I was nauseous, I was dry heaving, and I was just shaking, and I was cold, and I was just kind of lying on the bathroom floor, and just, I don't know, I was just freaking out, and my mind was kind of foggy, and like I didn't fully understand like what was going on, and I was just laying there, and I don't know, I didn't know what to do at that point. Like I knew I kind of needed to go to the hospital because, like I said, I don't ever get to that point where I'm dry heaving, and I knew that I haven't eaten in a while. And one thing that I talked about at my appointment in Cleveland with my doctor was the possibility of getting a feeding tube until we figure out how to better treat me. But at the time when I was in the doctor's appointment the day before, I was like, I don't want a feeding tube. Like, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to try my best to get the nutrition I want, because I don't want a feeding tube. I don't want to have to go through that when I can try to do it myself. So we talked about that possibility, and he's like, okay, like if you ever feel like you do get to that point though, just let me know, and I can do everything I can to coordinate with your doctors in Florida to get you one if you need it, but you know, try your best. So I was like, okay. So I was kind of laying on the floor, and I was like, okay, you know what? I surrender. I needed to get a feeding tube because I don't know, like clearly I need help, and this is just not going okay. And I tried calling the doctor in Cleveland, but he wasn't answering. It was a Friday, and I was just like, I'm not getting this feeding tube. I'm like, I don't know if I can make it through the weekend. So I decided to go to the ER, and one, that was for the possibility of feeding tube, and two, because I literally felt like I was dying on the floor. So I went to the hospital, and I got there, and I remember like when I went to go check in, they asked me to enter like my social in like the little keypad, and I remember like blanking out of what my social was. And if you know me, which most of you probably don't, but I'm really good at remembering numbers. Like I have this weird ability to remember numbers no matter how unimportant they are. Like I remember a library card that I had from so long ago, and I couldn't remember the last 4 digits of my social, and I didn't really think anything of it. I was just kind of, like I said, out of it, which will make sense when you understand why I was out of it. And then they took me back, and they took my blood, and then I kind of just sat in the waiting room. The rooms were full, so I had to wait. I think I almost waited two hours, but then they pulled me back, and they were like, okay, so your blood sugar is really low. And I was like, how low? And they told me when they took my blood 2 hours prior, it was 48. If you don't know much about blood sugar, the normal blood sugar range is 70 to 100. And when it gets to like the 70s range, you want to start like treating that and to get some more sugar in your body because your brain needs glucose to function. Glucose is super important in all of your body, whatever, you can look it up, but basically mine was 48. And then, like I said, I sat for 2 hours, so I don't know how low it was at the point when I got back because they didn't take it. They just immediately started to treat it. They hung dextrose, which is IV fluid with sugar, and they made me chug orange juice. And I remember after I chugged the orange juice and got the sugar water in me, I started to feel less nauseous, more awake. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of low sugar? Why? And I was like, well, the reason I didn't think about that was because the symptoms that I experienced were the exact same symptoms that I experience every day with my condition, which is honestly the scary part of like GI disorders, because a lot of the symptoms you have can be symptoms of more serious things as well, and you wouldn't know because you experience those every single day. That was scary, but I am just glad that I made it to the hospital and I decided to go to the hospital and they were able to recognize the low blood sugar and treat that right away, because like I said, if I didn't go, I really don't know what would have happened to me. And yeah, so that is that. So then after they treated me, then they decided to admit me because they said I was malnourished, I was in starvation ketosis, my body didn't have anything left, I was acidotic, my body was very, very malnourished and in a really, really bad state. And I honestly didn't know that necessarily, because as I was saying in the intro of my video, why I wanted to make this was to show you that consequences often come before it's too late. There's like no warning signs, because I was feeling the same the past couple months, even though I was only eating once every 24 hours and then not eating for like 3-4 days in a row. I was feeling the exact same, and then all of a sudden my body switched and dropped. No warning sign, it just happened all at once. But my past actions are what built up to that, but I didn't know that. Then at this point, I was in the hospital it ended up being a week, and a couple days after I was admitted, I got a nasal tube down into my intestines. And they, waited one day, I think it was 2, because I believe I got it on Sunday and I was admitted Friday, for a couple of reasons. One, when you're malnourished and they start feeding you again, you're at risk for refeeding syndrome, which it kind of messes up your electrolytes because your electrolytes have been depleted so long, and then you get more and then your body like freaks out. That is something that they were worried about, so I had to try to take in some fluid myself first to kind of help start to balance out my body chemistry. And then another reason they had to wait was because they had to have a special team come and insert the tube because it's going past my stomach. And so once that was all coordinated, Sunday night I got the tube inserted and it was through my nose down into my intestines. I thought I was going to get an NJ, which goes into the jejunum, which is the second part of your small intestine, but I actually think it was an ND, a nasal into my duodenum, which is the first part of your small intestine. They never really specified, but based on like the length of the tube and how they inserted it, I just feel like it was a nasal duodenal tube. But that whole experience, awful. It was so bad. So I was awake for it, and they used this little tracking device. They put like something on my stomach. It's like a little triangle thing. If there's a picture of it, I'll try to insert it to show you what I'm talking about. But anyways, they put this little thing like on my stomach, and then they have like a tracking in the tube or something, so that way when it lays on the stomach it shows where in your intestines it is. But it's just like it's like a graph and you see it. Okay, I'm just gonna insert a picture or something because I can't really explain it. But anyways, so they go up through my nose. They tried one of my nostrils first and they couldn't get past, so then they switched to the other one. But honestly, I think it was this one. I honestly can't remember at this point, but then they stuck it up, and then when it hits a certain point, then they go back down into my throat, and then I have to like swallow as they're threading this thing through my throat. And I don't think I personally gagged, but like I was trying so hard not to, and there's like tears running down my eyes. I'm like clenching my eyes shut and just trying to concentrate on not to gag or throw it up as they're just like putting it down, threading it down. And then on this little graph thing, they have a machine with the little graph and the tracker. They can see where it like loops and where it like goes past your stomach, and then they just threaded it a little bit more, and then once it was tracked in there, then they just took out the little guiding wire, and bam, it was in me. They never did like an x-ray or anything to confirm placement, which kind of concerned me, but I survived, I guess. But I would have wanted an x-ray, I feel like, to be a little bit more cautious. But anyways, the worst part of this thing, well, actually I don't think it was the worst part, but another bad thing about this was they used a securement device called a bridle. And it's this little blue thing, which you'll see in my pictures too, that it's this little blue thing that secures the tube just to prevent it from coming out as well. I mean, you don't have to have it, you can just tape it, but this thing, it hurt and it wasn't the best to have. It was nice because I worried less about it coming out. But anyways, they insert like something up one nostril and then the other half the other nostril, and they insert it so far back, and there's like magnetic things at the end of this, and it like magnetizes magnetizes behind this bone, like back in your skull, and then they tie it to your tube. So right after I got the whole tube shoved down my nose into my body, then I had to get that thing shoved up and magnetized and tied. Overall, not a pleasant experience, but I survived. Anyways, I completely forgot to tell you about my other low blood sugar scare. So let me tell you about that before I get more into my feeding tube part. After I was admitted that night, so I was admitted Friday night, they gave me some more fluids and I was trying to eat like clear liquids, but I still wasn't eating that much. But I thought my blood sugar issue was fine. I just thought like, oh, I just needed a replacement and now that was enough to maintain me, but it was not. So that night they did like frequent blood sugar checks. I can't remember, I think it was like every 4 hours they checked my blood sugar. And when they did my, I think it was like 12:30 at night, so 12:30 a.m. blood sugar check, they checked my blood sugar and I was, like I said, I was feeling fine. Like I was awake, oriented, I was my normal nauseous. They took my blood sugar and they're like, your blood sugar is 45. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm fine, I'm chilling. And my nurse tech, she was like super calm. She's like, yeah, it's not good. I'm gonna go get you some orange juice. So I was like, okay. So they brought me some orange juice and I chugged that. And then for those of you who don't know, when you have hypoglycemia, which is low sugar, you treat it with at least 15 grams of carbs, and then they come back and they check your blood sugar in 15 minutes. So 15 minutes later she came back, took my blood sugar, and then kind of like went blank and she like quickly like packaged up her stuff, and I'm like, am I okay? Like, is it okay? She goes, your blood sugar is 39. And I was like, oh crap, like I just treated it and now it's even lower than it was before. So she ran to go get my nurse, and then I was kind of just sitting up, and then like other nurses would like walk by and like check in on me, because 39 is really low. This is kind of a sidetrack, but I was watching House one day and one of the patients on there started having a seizure, and they were trying to figure out why she was having a seizure, like where it came from, and they took her blood sugar and it was 38, and that was causing the seizure. And I was like, when I watched that, I was like, my blood sugar was 39. I mean, when your blood sugar is low, no matter what level it is at, what number it's at, it could be at like 60, it could be at 50, you are at risk for seizures and coma. And for some reason at 39, I was fine. And I don't know like how I got so lucky with that, and thank goodness like they were checking my blood sugar frequently and were on top of it at my hospital. So during like the whole scare, my nurse was trying to get a prescription for a glucagon shot, but we wanted to treat it, you always want to try to treat it orally first if the person is conscious. So like I was conscious, so they would try to get me to take food first before they inject me with the glucagon shot. So he was getting a prescription for that, or like an order for that, and then they were just giving me like these little oral glucose shots where I was like chugging those, apple juice, orange juice. They were just trying to get everything that I needed, and eventually it got up where I did need the shot, thank goodness. But then they made me eat like broth and jello at 1:30 at night. So I think I have a picture, like a Snapchat that I took at like 1:30 a.m. where I was eating just to keep my blood sugar up. But that was a pretty big scare, because that is a really low blood sugar, and like I said, anything could have happened at that point, but I was somehow okay. So I'm just super lucky and fortunate about that. So that's that story. Back to the feeding tube. So I got the feeding tube Sunday night, and then I was being started on feeds, and they started me on a formula called Osmolite 1.5, which means that for every 1 milliliter of the formula, there's 1.5 calories in it. And they started me on 20 mLs for a couple of reasons. One, to reduce the risk of refeeding syndrome, as I was talking about before. And then also your intestines isn't like your stomach, so it doesn't have a reservoir, so you can't put a bunch of food in it at a time anyways. So I was getting 20 mLs 24/7. So I was on feeding 24 hours a day, never stopped. So yeah, I started on 20 mLs, and then they would slowly, I believe every 12 hours, they would increase it by 5 mLs, and my goal was to reach 45 mLs. Overall, I don't know. So the thing about this formula was, I mentioned, I believe in my gastroparesis video, but I stopped eating dairy for around, I don't even know how long ago now. Probably about 3 years ago, maybe 2 years, something like that. But I've been off of all dairy products for quite some time, just because it made me feel like really bad. It made the nausea worse, it made bloating worse. I just didn't feel good, so I didn't eat dairy. And this formula had milk protein in it, so this formula did not make me feel good. I felt super bloated, super heavy, tired, just very groggy. It just, I don't know, like, it just made me feel really bad. I have like this picture where I look like I'm literally dying. I have like what is that, towel, like a cold towel laid on my face, because I just feel so bad. But I had to have it because I wasn't getting nourishment, so I needed to have this formula anyways. So I was just going through that, and then every 12 hours they would increase it, and it just, I was getting nourished, but like I still felt really bad. I was taking Zofran all the time, but that's the only formula that they had at the hospital, so I just had to take it. But I looked into getting different formula for when I would be discharged home. So I'll talk more about that when I talk about me being discharged. But I want to talk about first the pain of having a nasal tube. And I was honestly so surprised at how much it hurt, because babies have this little tube. Babies have nasal tubes all the time. So I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it, right? This thing hurt so bad in the back of your throat. It hurt to swallow. It hurt like my nose. It felt like it was constantly like tugging on my nose. And I was just miserable. Nothing would really help it. I remember taking like Tylenol, and it barely touched it. It was so bad. And they gave me like lozenges, and those helped a little bit while I was having the lozenge. Like, it helped, but as soon as it was gone, the pain was back. And they did try to give me this thing called hurricane spray. That worked the best. But they basically sprayed it, and it almost felt like my whole throat was kind of paralyzed a little bit, because I could barely swallow. But that means it was numb, and it felt so good. But that only lasted like 20 minutes, to be honest, because it just, I don't know, the pain was so bad. But that was a nice relief for a little bit, but you can't have that very often, so I only got that one time, and then I just had to deal with the lozenge. But for the people who have these tubes long term, I don't know how you do it, because it is just so uncomfortable. I didn't like it. But it got me the nutrition, which is the most important part of this tube. So the rest of the hospital stay, nothing else was too exciting. It was just me in the hospital working on increasing my feeds to my goal rate so I could go home, and that was pretty much it. And then it was time for me to come home, and I came into an issue, and that was my hospital did not want me to go home with a nasal tube. They said that nasal tubes are temporary for those in the hospital, and they don't send people home because of the dangers, which I do like understand. But also, I needed this nasal tube for like a very temporary period. I just need this tube to get me from where I was now until I found the treatment that was going to help me, which ended up being my surgery. So I just needed it from now until surgery, which ended up being like a month and a half. But they didn't want me to go home. But after, it literally took a couple days, but after a couple days, like, the doctor cleared me to go home with the tube, said it was fine, but the hospital, someone higher up in the hospital said no. So then the doctor worked to convince, I guess, but just help the person who was higher up in the hospital understand that it is safe for me to go home, and that having home health come and check on me a couple times a week to make sure everything is okay. And literally after a couple days of going through this, I was discharged home, I think on either Friday or Saturday of the following week. So I was in the hospital for a full week. And when I was going home, a rep from a home supply company for the tubes came, and they just taught me how to use everything. And then at that point, I was also figuring out how to change the formula I was on, because like I said, this formula was making me feel really, really awful, and I wanted to try to change that. And I ended up switching to Kate Farms, and I initially had to just buy it with my own money, which sucks because It is, I think, $100 for 12 bottles, and that's a lot. But I knew that in order for me to feel better, I needed to do it. And then eventually I worked on getting insurance approval to where it became cheaper for myself, thank goodness. So after the home health person taught me how to use all of my stuff, then I went home and started my home care of myself with a feeding tube. And even though I'm in nursing school and I was taught how to use it, it was still so scary to operate this tube by myself at home. For the people who don't have a medical background and are just taught this at the hospital and then sent home, I don't know how you guys do it, because it's really intimidating. It is so intimidating. Even though I knew about this stuff, just to care for myself with it, it was a little bit scary, even though it was nothing too advanced. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with feeding tube. Getting clogged, it spraying everywhere, the pump not working, anything like that. The biggest issue for me was the pump not working. Well, technically it was the formula, sometimes it was the pump, but I switched on to Cape Farms. I had a Cape Farms delivered when I was in the hospital to my house, so when I came home I switched my formula to the Cape Farms, and my pump would beep all the time saying that it's clogged, it's not working. Okay, I didn't explain this part very clearly, but when I was talking about my tube being clogged, I wasn't talking about the personal tube that was going up my nose into my body. I was talking about the tube that is attached to the feeding tube bag that runs down and attaches to your tube. So there's two kind of separate tubing systems that I did not explain. So my tubing system in my body was fine. It was never clogged. I was always able to flush it. But what would happen was the formula coming from the bag into the tubing that connects to the bag would get clogged or stuck in there and wouldn't come out of that tubing into my tubing. So that is what I was explaining here, is that the formula would be even too thick to go through that tubing. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. Let me know and I can try to explain it a little better. So my personal tubing never got clogged. The bag with its own tubing did. And I remember being up until like 2 a.m. the night I got home from the hospital, just dealing with this pump because it wasn't working. And then we found out that it was the Cape Farms formula that we got. It was clogging, and we ended up calling like Cape Farms, and we asked for like recommendations on how to not get it to clog. They told us to blend it and or blend it with applesauce or something like that. But we just blended it, and after we blended the Cape Farms formula, it worked. And they think that it had that issue with clogging because it came from an Amazon warehouse where the temperature control may not be as what it needs to be at. So they recommended that we order straight from like their warehouse or whatever they keep it. And as soon as we ordered directly from them, I didn't have any issues with the formula. I just shook it up, poured it in like my feeding tube bag, and I was good, and I didn't have any more clogging issues. So that solution was solved, but there was a lot of back and forth. And one time when they sent me a replacement pump, the pump that they gave me was broken. So then I had to call again and get another pump. And there's so many like technical issues that can go wrong with like feeding tube, and it's just a lot to deal with. And it kind of sucks because when you're sick and tired and undernourished, that's the last thing you want to be dealing with, is trying to figure out how to get new feeding tube supplies. I am lucky though, because I didn't really have any other issues with my feeding tube. I know a lot of people have issues with clogging, and a lot of people have issues with it leaking. And in this clip, I was talking about how my nasal tube never got clogged, and the reason why that sucks so much for the people who do get it clogged is if you can't get it unclogged, then you have to pull the tube out and reinsert a new one, and that's just not a fun thing to go through twice. I am so thankful I didn't have any of those, but I also had my tube very short term, so I didn't have issues with clogging. And also I didn't have an issue with clogging because my feeds were running 24/7, so it was constantly running, except for like the short periods of time I was in the shower, and I luckily didn't have anything leak, thank goodness. Oh yeah, another thing that I wanted to talk about with a feeding tube, kind of what to expect, or something that I didn't think of, was if you are getting fed 24/7 or through the night, you have to sleep upright. Not like this, but like you have to sleep at least at like, I think maybe like a 30-degree angle, something like that, because you have a risk for aspiration, which means like the food would come back up and then you choke on it and then you swallow it and go in your lungs. That would be really bad. So you have to sleep upright. So I had to get this little wedge thing and sleep upright every single night. So for a good month, I did not lay down at all, which was not fun. It was not the most comfortable, and like my neck hurt, and I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining this whole time, but it's just for the people who have feeding tubes, I just want to say that you guys are awesome, and I hope people who don't have feeding tubes also watch this video to understand what people who do have feeding tubes have to go through, because I think it's more so important for other people to learn more about what other people go through, so you can have more empathy, you can understand, you can help them in different ways. And I think that's really important, especially like with what's going on today. How much education is so important in understanding yourself and helping to understand other people, which is why I also want to make these videos about my stories, so I can help educate people about what other people are going through. And just, I don't know, I just want to make things better and help people understand. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the realities of having a feeding tube and some things that you may not think about when having a feeding tube and kind of what to expect. The first thing is you can't just get up and go somewhere. You have to like pick up all your supplies, make sure you're all in line. You have to have everything situated so nothing gets pulled out, nothing gets yanked on, and everything is in position. So like I always had to wear like a little backpack and make sure like the tube was like taped to my face and that I wasn't gonna pull on anything, and everything was running and everything was good, and that I had all of my backup supplies. So that was like the thing, is if you were to go out of the house, you had to make sure you had like backup supplies. You had to have backup syringes, backup formula, backup bags, backup batteries. Just had to have like everything ready, more than you would think of, so that if anything could go wrong, you had the solutions to fix it. Because it really is important to make sure you're getting constant feeding if you are on 24-hour feeds, or just if you're on long-term feeds. It's just important to make sure that you're getting the nutrition, and then if something were to go wrong, like getting your tube clogged, anything like that, any leakage, you just want to have backup supplies. And then because of all those supplies and you're wearing it on your back, it hurts your back. It's heavy, so that was not a good thing either, but it's just what you have to do, you know? And then I personally never got fully used to the feeling of the tube in my mouth or my throat. It didn't hurt as bad, but it was just uncomfortable. Whenever I'd swallow, it'd sometimes shift over, and it just, I don't know, it didn't feel good, and it hurt to like swallow pills, and I had to take medications, and I don't know, it's an unpleasant feeling. And like I said, I just have so much respect, and I'm just in awe of people who have these tubes for long term, because I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't. You guys are so strong. And another reality of feeding tubes is that there's just a lot of kind of extra planning and extra work. You kind of have to work around your feeding schedule, work around when your formula is gonna run out, and it took a lot of time out of the day. I don't know, that's another reality of feeding tubes. And then also another thing that I did not think about was getting dressed and taking a shower. I am a person who often changes clothes a couple times a day, but with this tube I did not. I had to pick out an outfit and stick with it, because whenever you'd have to get dressed, you would have to unhook yourself from the feeding, flush your tube, and then, you know, get dressed, and then flush your tube again, and then like make sure the pump is still working with the tube, and then stick it back in and run the feeds again. It was just a lot of extra work just to get dressed and go take a shower. Anyways, I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like I am complaining the whole time and I feel so bad, but I don't know. I just want to highlight the realities of an illness, because there's so much that people don't realize what other people are going through. I know I kept a lot of what I went through kind of not a secret, but I just didn't really talk about it much to people. I didn't post much about it on my social media, because I didn't want people to feel bad for me. I didn't want to sound like I was complaining the whole time. I just didn't want to, I don't know, cause negativity. I didn't think people cared. But I don't know, I kind of over time I realized that while it is like a very negative thing to talk about, and that I shouldn't always be focusing on the negative, it's just important to educate about what I went through and what other people are going through, just so people are more aware. But in the long term, even though I had all those difficulties with the feeding tube, and having a feeding tube is not easy, it didn't really matter, because I was getting the nourishment that I needed for my body, which I knew that I needed, which made all of that worth it for me, because I wanted to live and nourish my body so badly, so I could go on and become a nurse, finish college, and just find a way where I can help people and impact people with what I went through, which is, I don't know, I'm just really happy that I'm able to do that now. And there are people who reached out to me after I made my gastroparesis videos, just saying that I helped them, and it was only a few people, but like that just meant so much to me, because that's what I wanted to accomplish with my videos. And then to have people actually tell me that's what I did for them was, I don't know, it was kind of surreal. Like I wanted to do that, but I didn't necessarily think that I could, or I didn't know that I could, and the fact that I did and I was able to do that just made me so happy and made me want to keep sharing my story, and just, I don't know, I just want to help people and bring joy to people's life and just help in any way that I can. So yeah, I don't know what I was trying to say. I kind of lost my train of thought, but doing all this just makes me so happy. Yeah. Okay, back to a little bit of the story. There's like a little bit left, but anyways, I had to get the tube out because I was not allowed to do school with the tube in. So one day I just called my local doctor and made an appointment, and they just yanked it out. Getting it out was a lot easier than putting it in. I have a video of it, but I'm not going to insert it because it's kind of gross. I mean, I don't find it gross, but to a lot of people it's probably gross, because the whole end of the tube was like black. It was disgusting. Getting it pulled out, like I said, isn't bad. It goes pretty quick, but as it comes up, you taste all of the like acid and bile, and it's just gross. But it was over super quick, and it felt so good to have that out. But then I started my journey of not having a feeding tube and trying to make it until surgery without much nutrition and still going through school. I am going to make a video on my journey to surgery. I actually like vlogged on my phone the week before my surgery and me in the hospital getting my surgery, and I eventually want to edit that and get that video out, even though it's gonna be super bad quality and not like the best vlogging, but I want to get that out to show more about the reality of gastroparesis and how I ended up getting surgery and my journey to surgery. So that is essentially my entire kind of feeding tube journey and my experience with it and everything that goes along with it. It was a lot to go through, but in the end I can't be mad about it because it put me to where I am today. I'm going to summarize a few of the lessons that I want you to get from watching this video, and I think the most important one is, if you are going through any GI condition, is to just get your nourishment and get it in whatever way that you can, in whatever way that works best for you. That is what is going to keep you living. That is what is going to keep you going. That is important. And going along with that, just listen to your body. It's difficult at first, but kind of just feel what you're feeling and just really kind of internalize what you're feeling, what your body is feeling, and that will help guide you on what you need to do. I think that is all that I have to talk about in this video. I hope it was somewhat educational and it helped you gain some perspective. It helped you maybe understand a little bit more about what I went through and what a ton of other people are going through. Please comment if you have any questions or comments. I will respond, and remember to subscribe if you are interested in watching any of my videos. I make a variety of videos, so there's a little bit of something for everybody. And like I said, I want to make more gastroparesis related videos in the future, so I would love to have you here, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!